Oh, good to see you this afternoon, Sabina. I'm looking forward to talking about this topic, which is dear to both of us. So we're going to talk about awakening and what your definition of that is, um, and how the process unfolded for you. But I'll ask each question sequentially. So
Oh,
yeah, let's kick off with what is your definition of awakening?
yeah. Okay. So, a couple of thoughts on that. Um, First of all, on one hand, I find it useful to give a definition of awakening because there are many misconceptions circulating, and I also see the downside of it because of how it is formulated or how it is being received or understood.
Right,
So,
right.
with that being said, I would say that awakening is just a word. It's a concept. So
Okay.
it's not a thing. It's not a state. It's not an achievement.
Hmm.
I'd rather say it's a process.
Okay.
And then again, the process can be viewed completely differently from um, different perspectives on it, like asking a Buddhist, asking
Yep.
a Taoist or a Sufi or a shaman or a Christian mystic. They will all give different definitions of what awakening is. So,
Sure. Yeah.
so
Uh,
I could give an experiential definition.
yeah, that'd probably be the best one because we don't get many of them in life, do we?
Yes. So,
What's your experience of awakening like? Yes, that would be a good one.
I would say like it was a falling away or a deconstruction of mental overlays, of um, deconstructing thoughts, concepts, beliefs, views, even even perception and consciousness.
Okay. Yeah.
And what was being revealed was that there is no separation and that
Mhm.
there is no self in anything
Yep.
and no one. And that also revealed like indirect experience. There is no self separable from experience. And
Right.
that would be my experiential definition of awakening.
Well, that's great. That's very clear. Yeah.
And I would also like to uh, put in a little warning on it that
Caveat. Yeah.
for people not to copy paste this and say like, oh yeah, yeah, okay, so this is awakening. So this is how it should unfold here. This is something how I should experience it like, like none of that. It's just what's happening here in my
Yeah, so you don't want to provide a template, a kind of definition that's like this is the definitive definition, but you're speaking personally, you're speaking about what you've experienced and you do experience now.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yes, it's a very see for yourself, do it yourself process for I think everyone, isn't it? That can be this one of the surprises as
Yeah.
the process unfolds. This is never exactly like someone else's experience of awakening in a way, because of the individual conditioning that brought you to that place.
Yes. And hasn't even the Buddha said something like, don't trust me on anything, check for yourself?
Yes, maybe slightly different words, but the same meaning.
Yeah.
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 I can't remember the exact words, but definitely see for your yes.
Yeah.
Don't believe me.
Yeah.
See for yourself.
Yes.
Um, in fact, yeah, that's a very good pointer to this day, isn't it? Yeah. So let's talk a bit about your process towards awakening and what happened, what started it perhaps, and
Mhm.
um, yeah, just tell me a bit about how this started off and how it went.
Yeah. Last time we talked about your path, and my story will be quite different, although we
Yeah.
have some similarities going on too. Um, and it has been a very long journey, so I will just keep it short and simple. But if there's anything in there intriguing you, just jump in and I can expand on it a little bit more.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
it's also hard to actually say where it starts. Um, but if we can say like it's starting with some peak experience, maybe that changed the trajectory of my life, then I would
Mm,
say it started in 1993.
hmm
I've always been someone very interested in spirituality and um, the secrets of the world and
mm,
the paranormal and things like that.
sure.
So, with a million questions always. And
Right.
it would wake me up in the middle of the night and I would have a couple of questions like, oh, why is this? So
Uh,
I
the
ended up
the curiosity and wanting to see behind what was apparent, right, to you.
perfectly. Yeah, nails it. I was seeing a spiritual teacher who was also working as a spiritual healer.
Mm,
And I remember very vividly that in one of the first sessions with him, he gave me an energy healing, laying hands on. And uh, I was looking down on my heart space and just saw it was covered with thick ice, like Arctic ice,
wow.
completely frozen. And during that session, that started cracking up.
Right.
And then
Oh,
was suddenly this huge golden sun
mm,
that was as big as my chest and started vibrating and emanating
mm,
light, golden light. And I was like, wow. And I came out of that building and I was walking down the streets and everything was golden. Everything was this light, and it was like it has this, it has this loving
mm,
feeling to it. It felt like there was love dripping out of the clouds, like golden
wow.
honey, you know.
Wow, wow,
And I
wow.
was like, wow, what is this? And that really shifted my life onto a new path
hmm
because I decided I want to learn how to be a healer myself.
Yeah, right. So it actually changed your whole
Yes,
trajectory. Yeah.
yes, it did. And so I first I took sessions there to, clear my own stuff, and then uh, being trained as a healer, and which also brought me in contact with his community. They
Oh,
were became my friends, and it was kind of like a close-knit community. And since this was so expansive and opened up a whole new world, it's like unleashing someone who had been chained. And I was just going
yeah.
into the realms, like the other dimensions, talking to angels and channeling Christ
Mm.
consciousness or whatever. It was just unleashing that and just bigger, higher, more,
Yeah.
quite
Right.
insatiable.
Well, yeah. No, it's relatable. When things have been frozen over, they can definitely expand and move pretty fast once there's a,
Yeah.
once the permafrost is melted.
Yeah. Um, but it was one way, in one way or the other, it was also like an escape from
Mm,
everyday life,
okay.
from this harsh world, this dark
Right.
place, Earth. So,
So you felt this split between mundane life, which was kind of
yes.
um bit brutal or bare, and this
Mhm.
other world or dimension, which was very special and very beautiful,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yes, exactly like that. And of course, there's uh, a tendency towards the light, but on the other hand, what you're not seeing is all the shadows that you are suppressing.
Right.
So that went on for a while
Yeah.
until then life happened. Um, 2005, my world, my whole life started crumbling.
Mm,
Um, Within a very few years, um, I was losing almost all my family, and
wow.
my marriage was almost failing, So, but the biggest part is that I realized that in this community, the spiritual community, this was more like a cult.
Right.
And I just intuitively knew I wouldn't be free there ever. You know, it,
Ah,
it
yeah.
was a very short and tiny little box that you're allowed to be in,
Yeah.
but you would never be really free. So
Interesting.
um, I tried to break free of that. And it took me actually several years to be able to really be free
Mm,
from it because I was so identified, so dependent upon all of this.
yeah.
And when I broke out of it, I also lost all my friends, my
Hmm.
community, my faith,
Yeah.
my guide, my teacher, um, my job, because it was his method that I was working with.
Okay. Right.
So
So really everything you
everything.
ditched everything uh all at once, it sounds like. Was it more or less all at once that this was
Yeah,
happening? Mm,
yes. It felt like all of it crumbling all at once.
yeah.
And it was like facing death
Yeah.
without a God, without a belief, without guidance or even rituals to cope with it.
Yeah.
That was pretty hardcore. And
Yes. Yeah. Very.
it ended up becoming a dark night of the soul, which lasted for three years.
Wow. Yes. I'm not surprised. It was a lot of loss all at once. I mean, actual loss of your parents or family members, it sounds like, that in itself can be very, have very profound effects sometimes. And but yes, I do get that you were, completely enmeshed in this community, and so to let go of that and the work that was involved and the spiritual support network at such a time, um, on the basis of wanting freedom is
Mhm.
very, very courageous. But I'm not surprised that you ended up in some dark and unfamiliar, difficult
Yeah.
places.
Yeah, and it didn't even feel courageous because I had no chance. It was no way of holding onto anything
Mm,
my whole life. No way. I
mm,
had no control in all of this. And mm, I didn't know if I would ever come out of it.
mm,
But since this was such a cult-like structure, I was so fed up actually with asking for help, asking
mm,
for guidance, because I really felt misused and manipulated. And
mm,
so while I was in this darkness, it felt like falling into utter darkness.
mm.
Um, I still wasn't, no, I wasn't ready to ask someone for help.
No,
Yeah.
no, that makes sense because the people that you were going to help for help to were not able to help or willing to help you in a really open way, but in a conditional way for whatever their belief structure, community loyalties, all those, that kind of help can feel particularly toxic, can't it, if you're already feeling vulnerable, because you're in a difficult space.
Yes, very much so. And so I was in this darkness for like 3 years, and I I just knew I can't go anywhere for help, and I didn't know if I would ever come out of this. And I discovered um, really one torch in this darkness, which uh, was wanting only the truth.
Mm,
I was
mhm.
just I was just finished with all the glossy love and light, unicorns and rainbows spirituality. And I just wanted nothing else but the truth.
Right.
And I was quite radical in this, because it was for
Mm,
dear life. Um,
mm,
it felt like there were all these holiest of holies standing in the shelf, and I would, like uh, letting them fall to the ground and see if they break. And
right. Yeah.
and when they broke, it was like, okay, no problem, I can do without. And
Right. So you were testing all your beliefs in
yeah,
this stage of the truth and nothing but the truth, as it were.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. And even like the angels and the masters and everything,
yeah.
and it was curious. After 3 years, it was suddenly everything was okay.
Hmm.
And I was out of it from one day to the other. It was gone. And none of my holiest of holies were there
Uh,
anymore.
Right. So none of them had survived this process of
No,
eradication, of testing,
no,
or no.
because it was
Mm.
also, it was all like overlays,
Right. Yes. Concepts.
concepts. And there was just me. And then, but it was okay because
Right.
during that uh, dark time, I was um, finding the ability to be able to be with everything that was coming up. Also all the shadows that I had avoided in all those years before,
Okay.
everything was coming up. It was dark. It was nothing that I wanted to look at before, but now it was okay.
Mm.
So everything could be welcomed, nothing needed to
Wow.
change.
Okay.
And it it was a very intense shadow work and emotional healing period.
Right. Yeah. It
So
sounds like you really turned to face what you hadn't faced before or ever, perhaps, and
yeah,
looked at it straight on. And
yeah.
amazing.
And all by myself.
Can
So,
I ask you something, just as
sure.
an aside? Do you think that there was something about how radical your wish for truth was that sort of made both made it very difficult because you suddenly were faced with all the shadow
Mhm.
material that you'd never seen, never, but
Mhm.
also um allowed you to, I don't know, learn how to be with the shadow and accept the shadow. Was there something in that?
Yes,
Um,
very much. It really paved the way to being able to stay with anything that is coming
wow.
up.
Okay, that's
And
something.
that also became my new way of working with people.
Right.
It changed the way I worked with people. So um, yeah, it was like very radical because I either wanted the truth and see everything that's there, or this is it. I'm done.
Hmm. Right.
Because I didn't know if this would really end and I would come out of it. So
Yeah, yeah.
it was a dark place, but also a sacred place. Now, when looking back,
Yes. Yeah, that
very
makes
sacred.
sense. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at the end of this phase, when it was suddenly over, was the first big shift.
Okay.
So that's why I'm talking about this a little bit longer, because I get the feeling that this path paved the way for the first big shift.
Makes
And
sense.
I was sitting down one evening and just wanted to do some natural meditation, nothing particular. And then suddenly everything changed. Um,
What changed? What shift? What did you see? What shifted? Yeah.
Everything was transparent. Um, it was a boundless field of consciousness. Um, I couldn't say if I was inside the house, in the garden, or in outer space. Um, I couldn't find any separation between uh, the table, the body, and the tree, and
Hmm.
no way to locate myself.
Hmm.
And there were no boundaries of the body.
Wow.
Mhm.
Right. And that sounds like, that I go by the kind of Fetter's methodology, which is particular way of categorizing those
Mhm.
shifts. But it sounds like you crashed through quite a number of illusions simultaneously right there.
Yes. And
Subject, object, perception, yeah,
yeah,
separate and maybe even federate. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, it's an aside.
it felt like I was this field.
Hmm.
So
Okay. Still, yeah.
still federate, I would
Still
say.
federate. Still federate. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
this field, and everything was connected. Everything was made out of this. Everything was transparent. Also the bodies, when I looked at people, everything.
Interesting.
And I had no clue what this was, because I was going this whole journey without a tradition, without a
Yeah.
teacher, without a
Hmm.
guide. So when this happened, I had no reference point, no frame of reference,
No.
what this was. So coming from the spiritual healing tradition, um, I first thought it was like kind of the fifth dimension or whatever,
Right.
until I realized, no, no, wait, this is no dimension at all.
Right.
So
Ooh, yeah.
it stayed like that. So this was
I
the
was going
new,
to ask you, yeah, did it persist after the meditation?
yes. So this new way of being or perceiving, minus all the body boundaries, remained like that 24/7 for 10 years straight.
Okay.
Mhm. So,
Wow. So quite big, profound shifts in one sitting. And that was just how it was for you after that.
yeah. And so now there was this paradox because I had learned to channel energies from above through the body, through the hands to the other person.
Yes.
But now there was no energy because it was just consciousness. There was no
Right.
flow of energy. There was
Right.
no separation between me and other.
Yeah.
There was no inside or outside, no up or down.
Yeah.
So I couldn't work any longer. From one second to
Right.
the other, I was, you could say, without a job because I couldn't work like that anymore.
Goodness. Wow. So what did you do to
Mhm.
um did it take you a while to work out a way of working with people again from this new perspective?
Yes. First of all, this changed perception so dramatically that after that, I had quite a few energetics going on. uh, Blurred vision. The my eyesight was becoming so bad that I went to see a doctor,
Mm.
and they said like, "Yeah, well, since the last time you were here, you're actually seeing better." And I'm like, "Uh-huh."
Wow. Yeah.
So
Strange, yeah.
it felt like also the energy system, the energy lines in the body, the meridians or anything, all that was being reconfigured. Also in the brain, that's how it felt.
Yeah.
Like going from analog to high speed digital.
I like it. Yeah.
It was so intense that for the first few weeks when I was working with a client, I couldn't speak while I was working because this new perception was taking up so much bandwidth, you could say,
Right.
that I couldn't speak.
Mm, mm,
And I found ways to work with this as the field. I
mm,
was the
mm.
field synchronizing whatever blockage was in the other person, uh,
Right.
synchronizing. And so the healing work just jump leaped, really. It was like, wow.
Ah, okay. So so that non-separation and so on gave you more access
Yes.
immediately, and you could just simply work with the person
Hmm.
as if, yeah, no separation there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they were like looking like holographic figures, and I could like turn them around and twist and see from all sides, and then just zoom in and see, okay, if this is a blockage or this is the past life or this is whatever it is.
Mm,
And
mm,
it was nice. And well, it was because that changed later. But
mm.
I also observed like this kind of seeing or sensing also jumped over to people attending my seminars or workshops.
Okay.
They were
Oh,
like kind of synchronizing in a way that they would start to perceive like that too. It's quite fascinating.
so you noticed it had an effect. That's interesting. Like it, like it caught on.
Yes, somehow, I don't know. It never
Yeah.
ended. I was just curious because like I said, I had no idea that this had to do and had anything to do with awakening. I was just curious.
Yeah, yeah.
It was helpful for others, fine. So,
Mm.
So that went on for a while. The the backside of it was like lots of roller coaster rides because how to navigate when there are no boundaries, when perception has changed so much and you just don't know what it
Yeah.
really means. And still there was this unwillingness to look for answers because I wanted to find out myself.
Okay, okay, okay. So you weren't looking in the books, you weren't looking at other spiritual teachers, you were just referring to your own experience, be a lamp unto yourself, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And this so-called field was becoming my teacher, you know.
right. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, that's beautiful, actually.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that went on for a couple of years, and then we um, we moved to the southern part of Germany, and
Mm-hmm.
um, without me knowing, we were surrounded by Buddhist centers everywhere,
Right. Right.
several of them.
Interesting.
So when you make new friends, of course, you
Yep.
start talking about yourself and the journey and what you're doing, and talk like that would come up. And for the first time in my life, there were people going like, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I was like, do you know anything about what I'm saying? Yeah,
Mm,
yeah,
so they
yeah,
could
yeah, yeah.
actually understand you. Yeah.
Yes. First time they somehow knew what I was talking about, and they would throw words like Mahamudra or whatever at me. And
Yes.
when they were gone, I would, Google what would that mean, and I,
Yes.
okay. And then they would like give me books and have a look here. And it suddenly started to dawn on me like, wow,
Yeah.
first of all, I'm not going crazy.
Mm-hmm,
This is not some extra dimensional space alien, whatever thing going on.
mm-hmm.
This is this is an awakening process.
Ah, so it's the first time you identified it when you had some feedback from other people who were
Yeah.
also pursuing an awakening process. And
Yes.
so you, through the language really that they used, you started to make that connection and think, oh, right, that's what I'm doing. That's what's
E-
happening.
Exactly.
That's
And that
interesting.
was so helpful because there was this feeling of this is all okay. You're fine.
That's profound. Yeah, no, that's very helpful, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Especially if you've been like up and down the roller coaster for years. So that was 2018. And again, out of the blue, I mean, the awakening process can be so different for people. It can be a gradual thing
Mm,
where shifts and changes almost go unnoticed. And then there are people who have these big sudden shifts and uh, dramatic stuff afterwards. I'm the sudden intense shifter.
yes, 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 yes. Yes.
So in 2018,
Well,
I don't know, I think I was listening to some podcasts or anything like that. And then suddenly this there was another huge shift. There was no longer a center, no longer a subject object, because that still was there in a subtle
mm,
sense.
okay.
Although there was this field which I was without knowing be identified with, uh,
Yes.
there was still some sort of object, subject object, and some
Mm-hmm.
sort of center of perception
Okay.
that was
Yeah.
gone in an instant. And uh, then it was finally and totally clear that there was no I, never has
Right. Never
ever.
had been. Ah, so you had little remnants of this
Mhm.
self-identification going on, it sounds
Yeah.
like, which was keeping a subject-object separation or keeping, yeah, just some sense of perceiving perceiving things Um, and that had been reinforcing somehow or holding up some sense of self
Yeah.
in the middle of it all. And then poof. But what was there anything that caused that particular shift, or did it just happen one
Uh,
day?
I was at that time I was suffering quite a bit because, like you said, it was never really clearly seen that there is no I, because I had no idea that awakening, that first of all, this was awakening, and second, that awakening was about seeing that there's no me, no self.
Yeah, yeah.
So it never dawned on me. So the roller coaster rides were so intense, and I was suffering a lot. And I
Mm.
started doing inquiry, the Advaita style, like who am I,
Oh,
or
who am I?
who is suffering, uh, and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. But not, I've
Okay.
never done any meditation practice or never done any real practice that I sat down and did for regularly,
Mm-hmm.
never. So I'm more like, I worked with open questions that I would
Okay. Yeah.
take throughout the day, and would wake up to in the morning and go to sleep with, and that would grind in the background, and then suddenly
Yeah, yeah.
a shift would happen. So,
Suddenly it shifted. Wow. You don't remember what particular question you'd given yourself the night before or anything like that? No.
no, no.
Master pointer made it fall. Well, yeah, I guess if your quest in a way, from the parallel being the Theta 8 process inquiry, you're asking not who am I, but what am I?
Mhm.
What am I?
Yeah.
Um, and yes, just really seeing whether there is that separate inside factor.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and when it goes, it really is profound, isn't it? I mean, you tell
Yes,
me, but what changed after that then? Did you
yes,
notice?
yeah, it was profound. It was like a split second of insight, and I had to laugh out so loud. It was hilarious. Like the joke was on me all the time. And I remember my husband was sitting opposite to me, working on the computer, and here I am bursting out in laughter, and he's like, "Are you okay? What's wrong with you?" Like, "Yeah." It was so funny. And afterwards, again, the energetics were quite intense because now
Mm,
everything was so close, so immediate.
mm,
And
I
I,
recognize.
Mhm. It was feeling like I was sensing and perceiving everything everywhere all at once.
Once, yes. Yeah.
No distance, very intense. The nervous system had quite a struggle. And in the aftermath of that, there was a few weeks or months where I had a nihilistic streak because,
Right, yep.
okay, since I don't exist, nobody else exists, nothing exists.
Nothing exists, yes.
And so, how now to work with people if they don't exist and I don't exist? So, I was again without a job because,
Oh, you kept firing yourself, really, didn't you? Throughout the whole process. Yeah, it's
yeah,
funny.
but settled down after a while, and yeah, it was clear. Okay, this is just a mental construct too. The no
Yep.
self, from being
Yeah,
a self to being a no self. So,
right. Yeah, you don't get to do that, do you? To be a no self. Yeah.
and yeah. Um, what's next? in 2022, again, out of the blue, I was reading a book.
Mm.
There is, I don't even remember which book. It was not about the book. I'm reading a
Mm.
book, and there is this shift. Again, a split second,
Mm.
and this field of consciousness is gone. That had been like the ground being or the background of experience.
Okay. Mm.
So that was major. And
Mm.
I would equate that to the eighth feather because
Yes. Gonna say that's really eight feta going, isn't it? That's when the field of consciousness or awareness or whatever it is we call it until that point,
yeah,
you realize that's not actually happening, strangely enough. Yeah, that's the real drop of feta eight. Yeah.
yeah,
Or it can be the signal it's dropped. Yeah.
yeah. And with it, this sense of self was gone. This
That's it.
this smell, this taste, this stinky, whatever, ungraspable aspect there where you still like that can feel a little bit like you. And that was gone. And then again, the nervous system, it was incredible because
Right.
if I had thought previously that things were close and immediate,
Yeah.
now this was really immediate. Like
Yeah.
it, the sense gates or the sense fields were like full on, and everything was immediate, direct, no distance, no center. It was everywhere and nowhere. Hard to
Mm.
explain,
Very hard. Yes.
but it
Mm.
felt very alive.
Mm.
And for the first time, actually, I had a honeymoon.
Hooray.
Yeah,
You had good.
finally. Because when people say like, oh, well, then there is this shift and then there's this honeymoon period and
Honeymoon
everything
period.
is like, yeah, well, Rosie, okay, I had this with the honey dropping out of the clouds in
You did.
the very beginning. But here for the first time for a couple of days, it was full on bliss.
Mm.
And the body was, I don't know, there was this field of energy and intensity and
Mm.
aliveness. Very
Right.
beautiful. And
Yeah.
yeah, but that
It's
changed. And actually, that was what followed was the longest period of having to deal with nervous system imbalances afterwards.
Okay.
I was really surprised how much trauma was there still was in the system, despite
Yeah.
the long dark night of the soul.
Yeah. I
Uh,
know it can. It's
mhm,
amazing, isn't it? The body. There's a title, isn't there, of a book called "The Body Holds the Score," and
yeah,
um, really, the brain doesn't because you just don't know when that process will finish. Sometimes, do you? Until it does,
yeah,
and even then, you can get little surprises pop up later. I don't know if you found that, uh, but
yeah,
yeah, it is when there are no more barriers of created by this eye projection. It's as if anything and everything that's there in the system, as it or whatever you want to call it, is gonna at some point emerge.
yeah, exactly. And but at this point, it was no problem
Ah,
because there was no. It was like bad weather coming through, like
yes, yeah.
cry, no idea why, no story attached. And then it would just stop crying. And
Right.
like the cellular memory was just
Mm.
clearing out stuff. And yeah, it was It was stressful at times because it was hard on the body, but there was no resistance to it.
Right, yeah. It
So
sounds like a really strong healing process as well for you. I mean, heal thyself, you are a healer, but sounds like this was very, very healing.
yes, and it took, I would say it took a year. And during that year, the remnants of reactivity and this general uprising against what is
Mm-hmm.
was just fading out and
Okay.
just going.
This was
So
the final piece, would you say? The resistance to the bad weather, maybe sometimes feeling bad, sometimes feeling really,
mhm.
whatever. Was that
Yeah,
what?
it wasn't so much an emotional resistance. It to me it felt like energy uprising that
Mm,
had the touch of like, yeah, this is not how it's supposed to be.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And
Right.
so that stopped after, a while that just faded out. And
Mm,
um so that then we're in 2024. So
yeah,
and
just
there,
last year.
yeah, just last year, it was kind of connecting the dots actually. And also with help this time.
Okay.
And what I came to realize is that although there was no longer a consciousness as a background and
Mm-hmm.
no ground of being, consciousness as the ground of being,
Mm-hmm.
no center, no subject object, no I, of course, but there was this subtle consciousness, very, very subtle, that was kind of in the foreground, weaving together thoughts,
Mm,
perceptions, and experiences to produce some kind of continuity.
okay. Yeah. So you still wanted some kind of uh yeah, what permanence, continuity, reliability, something along those lines.
Yeah, you could call it like that. Yeah, I was just seeing that there's a mechanism,
Mm,
knitting it all together, and I was again curious, and then
yeah,
just, oh, this is just a thought.
right.
So also with like when that field of consciousness fell away, before that it really felt like this is the end,
Yeah,
because you
yeah,
cannot find anything outside of consciousness. So
right.
what else
Yes.
could there be? You know?
Yeah.
Okay, I had this. I'm grateful and really this feels like grace to me that there was this intuition. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I cannot find anything outside of that. But there
Mhm.
was this feeling or this intuition like, no, 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 there's more.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't know what it is. I don't know where to look, how to, go about it, but I know there's more.
That's his
So,
lucky.
and then like when that fear fell away, I saw too, wow, this was just a thought. And again, like here in the knitting together in the foreground was just a thought too.
Right. Incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're like movie makers and scene producers, and it's incredible, isn't it? When you see what you can produce or what you are um constructing, really. And it is just a construction of the mind.
Yeah. And then identifying with that construction. Yeah.
Yes, seeing it
Mhm.
as me or part of, yeah,
Yeah.
what makes a me. So what was was there a final piece to this, or was there a sort of when you say you went to someone else to look at the
Mhm.
resolution of that, what was that like?
It was like seeing that all of this is just concepts
Mm,
and that all the question of like existing or not existing, or being or not being,
Right.
sense of no or no self or self. It all makes no sense.
Right.
It was quite, again, a split second uh, of noticing, wow, this doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But it was remarkable in a way. Uh,
Yeah.
of course, I was then working with the feathers just to see, like,
Yeah.
did I miss anything? Because this has
Yeah.
been self-guided. And of course, I looked into, is there something like permanence or impermanence
Huh.
or satisfactoriness or reliability and so on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one after the other was just seen to be like, wow, asking that does make no sense.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, just to frame it for how I usually guide that part with
Mhm,
people, it's, asking people if they can actually have an alternative version of whatever's happening.
mhm.
And if so, what role do they have,
Yeah.
if any, in that? And I mean, there are various ways of framing that question, but it's incredible how that persists, all the illusions, this underlying tendency to, sort of somehow expect a different version of whatever's happening
Yeah.
to be possible, or desirable, let's say.
Yeah.
When the cosmic joke there isn't it, is, well, it can't be anything other than what is, right?
Yeah, surprisingly enough. And
But
I
yeah.
remember that during that time, uh, there must have been some subtle holding on to existing, because I remember
Mm.
lying in bed and just what I don't know any other way to phrase it, watching myself dying. It felt like I had a balloon
Mm-hmm.
with a strand in my hand,
Yes.
and the balloon was floating away from me, and I was watching this last strand of me existing being
Mm.
pulled out or slipping out from between my fingers, and there
Mm.
was
What an image.
nothing to be done. And that was quite amazing. I think that kind of fell together with that seeing, like, oh wow, this really does make no sense.
Yeah.
There's just what is,
Yeah.
period. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's beautiful, actually. I really like that
Mhm.
image
Mhm.
of the balloon string slipping out of your fingers
Yes.
and floating away. I do really relate to all that you said about your process of awakening, even though you did it completely spontaneously, Sabina, which largely, which is incredible to me. Most people, including me, need a lot of help, So, but it also makes it somehow cleaner without the conceptual frameworks that, or pathways that a lot of people try to follow, a particular one, and then compare their experiences to that. Whereas you were just searching for what's true, really. Um, Presumably, even the concept of truth
Yeah.
had to go by the wayside eventually. Um, But on that note, I mean, did you have any expectations of that final piece,
Mhm.
stepping into life just as it is? Um, yeah. Did you nevertheless, even though you did your own pathway, have any expectations, and were they met? Or what could you say about that process?
Mhm. Well, let me jump back a little bit on this, because I've never searched for awakening or
No.
enlightenment. I was looking for the end of suffering. That was
Right.
my question, was like, why do we suffer? I did not have any contact with Buddhism before that.
No,
So I was
no,
completely intrigued when I found out later, because that's a core thing in Buddhism, like, you know.
it is.
So
It
there was
is.
just this feeling of like, why do we suffer? Really? I mean, like, not on the surface, but what are the roots of that?
Mm,
And can this be ended? Not just for myself, but
yeah.
generally. That was my whole quest, you know.
Wow.
And but then I came in contact when I was in the spiritual community. I came into contact with like the spiritual version of awakening, enlightenment. There in the bookshelf of my teacher were books like from the Great White Brotherhood of Ascended Masters.
Oh,
And
yes.
there it was like, yeah, well, there were like those beings in light bodies, raptured, and uh, that you would know when you were awakened, when your eyes would turn violet, and that,
Oh,
yeah, your hair wouldn't grow any longer, and that your home would not gather any dust.
wow.
Yeah. So actually, I'm like staring into the mirror. Yeah, okay, eyes still brown, so no.
My house is definitely still dusty, I can tell you.
That dust was really a problem. So uh, what I had learned there was just no way
Right.
matching up with the roller coaster stuff that I was going through. So it never dawned on me that this could be awakening, what to expect from it, because like
Okay.
I
Right.
had this idealized versions. They were completely, I don't know, out of my world. And it was rather some distorted ideas about
Right.
enlightenment. So,
So interesting, isn't it? Because actually, I think your definition of your pathway as being, okay, let's get to grips with suffering and the causes of suffering and how to alleviate suffering, in a real way. I mean, from my mind, that was the Buddha's message.
mhm,
Um, however it got distorted along the way and in its religion that followed, but for me, that was the core of you know, that is the core of the Buddha's teaching, and yeah, that's
mhm,
it. You did it. You addressed that as he was addressing it, however many thousands of years ago.
yeah.
So
And there's
yeah,
always been this component in all of that, that whatever was experienced or seen here, uh, I would share with others.
yeah,
So there was never this, I'm doing this for myself, so I'm like free of suffering or whatever.
mm,
Whenever it was helpful and meaningful for others, I would share, but only that which I had already experienced, nothing
yeah,
like from a book or something.
yeah,
And yeah, but expectations. Well, what astounded me the most was how ordinary this is, like how extraordinary ordinary.
yeah, 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 yeah.
So,
Not not special, magical, changing eye color stuff. Yeah.
in fact, um, when this last seeing, like, okay, this makes no sense at all. After that, there was a short period of like 3 or 4 days where I felt I was like in zombie land,
Mm,
because everything felt so utterly normal, so dry, so desert-like.
mm,
not very interesting to the mind. And there was like this dread, like, oh my God, this is going to be like this for the rest of my life.
Right.
I'm in
Yeah.
zombie land now. So it was so not what one would expect.
No. It,
Of course, that stopped after like I said, 3 or 4 days when it was seen like,
mm,
wow, okay, wait a minute, that's just a thought again.
yeah.
The mind trying to fixate or reify now an
Yeah.
absence of whatever
Yeah.
into a new state.
Mm. I wanted to address this earlier when we were talking about your awakening, actually, is that what I recognize is those particular shifts, which can be quite dramatic. And that's, I share that in common with you. They were definite shifts along the way, but they're often very disorientating, aren't they? And it is as if the mind scrambles to make sense of the new order of whatever you've done. And so while the shifts can have particular states associated with them, like you've just described a zombie state, or, previously a bliss state, or, various states.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know if you noticed this, but for me, it was as if they quite quickly became a new normal. But they didn't, it's not like a state that persisted. It was more that, it's as if the shift had to settle through the whatever, and you end up with it's normal. It's like a new normal again. So it's a different perspective, but not like you persist in some state associated with the shift. That's what I'm trying to
Yes.
say.
Yeah.
If you can relate.
Yes, yes, yes. Very, very much so. Thank you for adding that because um, after the shift, when this becomes like the new normal,
Mm,
without being a reified state of any sorts, at some point you can't even remember how it was.
right. Interesting. Yes, true.
And you cannot go back there or feel back into it, or it's just
It's
gone.
gone. It's
Yeah.
gone. Yeah.
So like,
Yeah.
how could I ever think things could were like that, you know? It's just so
Yeah.
obvious and it becomes the new normal. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah. But I would have never thought it would be so normal.
No.
And
Yeah.
but now it's not a problem. At first it was because it, like I said, it felt like zombie land.
Yeah.
But now I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah. Well, for me, that Zen saying often comes back to mind around that when people have that realization, oh, it's just ordinary life, and after all that, so, that saying, something like, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water, and it suddenly makes much more sense, doesn't it? It's not that nothing has happened in the meantime, but you do.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not that you don't necessarily, you might do different things afterwards. It might change. That's my next question to you. How has it affected your life? But
Mhm.
um, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe that's a good segue into how has it affected your life
Yeah.
since it's
Hmm.
only
Yeah.
that last shift. I mean, since then, and I mean, have you noticed any changes in your day-to-day experience of life or work,
Mm,
relationships, and so on?
since this has been a process that has gone for such a long time, um, the changes were gradual on the way. Um, I would say what mostly changed over and over again was my work.
Mm,
Because I've been working as a healer for 30 years now.
yeah,
And so percept which very much hinges upon um, this subtle sense fields like clair sentience and clairvoyance and these things, and they change dramatically over and over again.
right.
Um, that when that field fell away in 22. For the first time in my life, my clairvoyance, the inner seeing, was gone.
Mm,
It was just blacked out. There was nothing.
wow.
For several months, again, I was without a job.
Yeah.
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 So that came back in a different way,
Interesting.
but it makes sense because this the subtle the subtle senses are very much intertwined with consciousness.
Right.
And without knowing, there was a construction of a framework in which the seeing of the energies of a person was happening, and the
Okay.
way it was interpreted by the mind, and the stories attached to it.
Mm,
When that all fell away, the mind just blanked out with this.
okay. Yeah.
And but now it's like there's still impulses coming up, but they don't need a
Hmm.
framework, they don't need a connection, they don't need a story attached to it. It's just there's an insight flaring up and it's being understood without much story, and then it's gone again. There's no way to fixate or manipulate or do anything with this. It's gone before I
Right.
can actually really, hold on to it. So it was kind of getting used to that.
Yeah. That's
But
fascinating. So it's not that you can't actually enter into, let's say, the world of the other person, and let's even say the other person, all right? But without those kind of frameworks that you had before of, yeah, field of consciousness, or, here's what's coming from them to me, blah, blah, blah. But you could still work without those constructs.
yeah,
Did you find that the healing work changed in terms of effectiveness or directness, or for the better, for the worse, or eventually after
yeah,
you got over the blip of, oh, no field of consciousness to work with here?
yeah, um, yeah. In a way that it's even more direct. Um, it's therefore also more intense because all the frameworks, all the overlays are like filters. And I don't need to construct a here and there, a me and other, and all of that. And still there are insights, there are things being felt that are right spot on. And
Mm,
uh, it's just amazing. I'm just reinventing the work in a way, and I'm
yeah.
still curious and playing around with it, but it's
Mm,
still there in a different way, but it's as accurate and helpful as it was with all the framework on top of it.
right. Yeah, no, that's fascinating, actually. I mean, it sounds like instead of actually putting yourself out of work as you went along, you just had to kind of go back to ground zero and reinvent it, or allow it to evolve from, yeah, whatever changes had of your own had happened.
Yes.
Um, and the work did evolve along with those changes in perspective. So, do
Yeah.
you find that you do also that the healing work seeks into awakening work with people, or is that only if they want it, kind of thing, or only if that's what they're there for,
Yeah.
or is it
Well,
more emotional, you know, on that level,
mhm.
healing?
um, Actually, there are quite a few people who come to me for years already, because for them it's a way of self-inquiry or whatever. They're not looking for awakening or whatever. They just want to live a
Right.
loving life, um, being compassionate with themselves and others. And there you go. There are shifts happening left and
Yeah,
right because, shadow work is a way to that can funnel into a shift in identity. I mean,
as you know very well, because that's how it happened for you. Yeah,
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 yeah. And that quite organically, um, which I just love to, observe like, wow, there's
yeah.
no, I want this, I need this, or it should be like this, or it should be like that. It just happens quite naturally.
Mm.
Hmm.
That's beautiful. It sounds such a beautiful process, actually.
Hmm.
Um, and does your work involve a kind of physical laying on of hands, as it were, or a combination of that and speaking and
Hmm.
or with the energy field, off, hands off, or I'm just curious.
Yeah.
What do you do?
The laying on hands has stopped many, many years ago because there is no time and space. So it doesn't matter if someone is like sitting
There
in
or not?
Rome or in Berlin or in South Africa.
Yeah.
It's just not in that category. So I don't need to touch people. So it's not,
Yeah,
it's a remote thing, if you would.
that's amazing.
So,
Yeah.
and it's a mixture of like, yeah, just quiet without talking, but it can also be just talking and stuff is
Mm,
happening on a different level beyond the words most of the
yes.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, the words are just on top of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Augmenting the
Yeah.
experience. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Or be providing some clarity afterwards, or framework. It's
Yeah.
often how words help, isn't it? Just to sort of make some kind of
Yeah.
sense of it. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I think we've covered. I mean, unless, yeah, that's the final question, I suppose. Is there anything that you'd like to add that we haven't yet talked about, or you haven't said as part of the things I asked you
Um,
about?
yeah, maybe just like adding a little bit about the way I work now. If
Yeah.
someone wants to get in touch, we can put the website in the description. And I work via telephone and online. And of course, with people who are in the awakening process, but also with people who are just not interested in awakening per se, who just want to be forgiving and loving with themselves. And
Mm.
in the process of doing so, rather transcending a self than reinforcing one, which often happens in therapy. So,
Yes, good point. Good point.
mhm,
Yes. So it's not about developing a self or a better self or a higher self. It's about a transcendence of self, you could
yes,
say.
yes.
Your work.
Yes,
Yeah.
and also like an awakening and healing of the heart.
Mm.
So that's an aspect too, aside from the classical inquiry into no self. And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It's interesting, isn't it? Because yeah, some people don't like the fetish language or methodology because it can seem dry or heartless or sort of, and yet for me, that transformation was very much of the heart. I mean, heart, mind, whatever you want to call it, but it certainly was a process full of heart, full of love, and yeah,
yeah,
and the
yeah.
So it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think any process that truly transforms you, as your work clearly is transformative for people. So it would address it would address multiple levels, wouldn't it?
Yes,
Simultaneously.
absolutely. And the feathers are beautiful. If you resonate with this approach perfect. And what I came across recently is a model that we will talk about some other time, which
Okay.
instead of looking at this process in terms of stages and locations or phases, looks at it like a process, like different themes or dimensions or threads of awakening that can weave together. This is a model that was created by Professor Salguero, and it's for those that have a spontaneous awakening, for example.
Yeah, I'd
Or,
love to interview you about that because also I want to learn more about it
yeah,
because it seems there are many people, well, yourself included, mainly, in fact, who can really relate to that. But it also seems to encompass more people who've come at this from completely diverse places or processes.
yeah. So
So,
this was nice because in looking back and applying this map onto my process, it just mirrors it perfectly. And so that's why I'm quite, yeah, taken by it. I'd love to expand on this a little bit more
yeah,
because for me it gave me the freedom that all of what was experienced was part of it. Nothing needed to be excluded, nothing was wrong, nothing was the wrong awakening or
right,
whatever, you know.
right.
So I
Yeah.
like that. So,
Can you, I mean, well, we will do a separate thing on that. I think it'd be worth doing, obviously, but can you just give the headlines of that system that you feel like you can relate your process to?
mhm. Yeah, like it's more like thinking in processes. For example, the professor calls this one theme a thread. Like imagine you braiding a thread, you have different themes in awakening
Mm,
that can braid together, integrate together. And for example, one thread could be the thread of emptiness, like in the
hmm.
Buddhist tradition. Like
Okay.
there, your process would involve a gradual or sudden deconstructing of reality, it becoming more and more empty of a self.
Mm,
And each thread has like an opening, which often is like a peak experiencing of something. And then it has a gradual trajectory, a life of its own, where it uh, comes to this complete seeing that there is no self in any phenomena or
right.
perception
Okay.
consciousness. And then
So there's the emptiness thread.
that's the emptiness thread, or take, for example, the unity thread, which is one that very many people experience,
Mm,
where you have like an heart opening and you
yeah.
experience this love, this holiness, this sacredness, and
Yeah.
it turns from a more personal, localized feeling of being interconnected with others, you know, into a more universal
Mm,
um, love that is seen
hmm.
everywhere and
Hmm.
nothing is excluded from it.
Yeah.
And each thread at one point becomes non-dual.
Yeah.
Here again, there is nothing and no one aside from this love, unity,
Mm, interesting.
holiness. So,
Yes. Yeah.
and
Oh,
so, for example, a person cannot only have one thread, although some do have a one thread awakening, like,
yeah.
for example, a Buddhist, you know, has an empty
Mm,
thread, clear cut. But
mm,
what if someone has an opening of a unity or love thread and they start
mm,
intermingling, and then you shift between like everything's empty to
Mm-hmm.
everything's full of love, and there can be
Mm.
quite a challenge because
Mm.
they seem to contradict each other
Yeah,
for a
right,
while.
right. Yeah.
And then another thread that people could have, for example, is the energy thread.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So if it's a real thread, it would be a trajectory going from having energy experiences in the body to
Mm.
then experiencing the body as an energy field to all the whole cosmos being energy, and even the tiniest structures of energy being dissolved into a flickering in and out of existence where
Mm-hmm.
not even consciousness is
Mm.
fixatable.
Wow. Yeah.
So that's an energy thread. So you could have one like this intertwined as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And the last one that he mentions is the thread of the unconscious,
Mm.
where the shadow work, the trauma,
Right.
but
Yes.
also
Ah,
all the conditioning, but also like the ancestral, then
yeah.
the archetypal, the
Wow.
astral, the cosmos,
Okay.
all of this conditioning. And here you also find like paranormal ability,
Yeah. Well,
because
yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
yeah, so when someone has this as part of the awakening process, there can be stuff like a dark night of the soul.
Yes. As you would certainly, I can see why you particularly relate to this model, but actually, as you speak about it, I can
Mhm.
relate to it completely. Um,
Yeah.
I didn't, even though, I came from a Buddhist background and, and then embarked on this unfettering, this specific thing, which you could see as an emptiness thread
Mhm.
in it's very much a subtracting, taking away of illusion. But yet, as part of that, the whole heart aspect, the whole energy aspect, the whole dark night, old conditioning stuff, yeah, it all came in. It all it all was part of the mix.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And for some
Very
people,
fascinating.
yeah. And for some people, energy phenomena or unity experiences are just epiphenomenal to just happen along the path. And for some, it really forms a thread of its own, where it goes from personal, located, to non-dual, universal, and then non-dual,
Okay.
and where it makes up all of perception. Like if you're at the end point of an energy thread, the
Mm-hmm.
the ultimate truth is, all everything's energy.
Mm-hmm.
If you're at the
Right.
rear end of the emptiness thread, everything's empty, you know.
Right.
And so when they intertwine and integrate, all the
Mm-hmm.
seeming uh, contradictory perspectives start to mingle.
Mm.
And at one point,
Yeah.
the threads are released.
Yes. I was going
So,
to ask you that. Yeah. Because in a way, yes, there's still concepts.
yes, of course.
Useful. We need concepts that otherwise it's difficult to string even a shopping list together, isn't it? But never mind awakening.
Yeah,
But yeah.
yeah,
Um, oh wow.
yeah,
I could talk forever about this, but I think we're gonna have to break it up into the next
yeah,
conversation.
yeah,
Just because of time constraints, really, but
yeah.
it's been a real pleasure talking to you, Sabina, about your process today. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for holding space for that.